Hey everyone, and welcome to RUBIN'S Mind Lab, where we break down the latest research into what it really means. Ever wonder if scientists actually trust their own findings, or if they think their work can be repeated by others? Well, this new study dives deep into that exact question. So, the big idea here is pretty simple. You know how sometimes you hear about a replication crisis in science, especially in fields like psychology. It basically means that when other scientists try to repeat a study, they don't always get the same results. But what do the scientists themselves think about this? Do they believe their own fields are reliable? Or do they secretly worry that their work might not hold up to scrutiny? That is what this research wanted to find out. Instead of trying to replicate studies themselves, these researchers went straight to the source, other scientists. They surveyed over 1,800 active researchers across 11 different fields in the human sciences. They asked them two main things first. What percentage of studies in your field do you think would actually be replicated if someone tried to do them again, with a lot of power and care? Second, what is the lowest replication rate you'd consider? Okay, and what is the highest rate that would still make you say, oh, there is a problem here? They chose fields that are part of a bigger project called SCORE, which is all about checking how well research replicates. So they got researchers from economics, political science, psychology, education, sociology, criminology, marketing and organizational behavior, finance, health, management, and public administration. Here's how they did it. They asked researchers to imagine taking 100 studies from their field, studies published in the top journals, and then trying to replicate them perfectly. They wanted to know, out of those 100, how many do you think would actually work out and give you the same result? Specifically, a statistically significant finding in the same direction as the original study. Then, they asked about those important thresholds. They wanted to know the lowest replication rate that wouldn't be a red flag, and the highest rate that would still be considered a red flag for a replication problem in their field. And what did they find? Well, across all the researchers and all the fields, the average scientist thought that only about 56.2% of studies in their field would replicate. The middle number, the median, was even lower at 60%. So, on average, researchers believe that just over half of the studies in their field can be trusted to be repeated. Now, this varied a bit by field. For example, in education, researchers thought only about 46.6% of studies would replicate, while in economics, they were a bit more optimistic, estimating 65.4%. Psychology researchers, a field often in the spotlight for this kind of discussion, estimated around 51.6%. But here is where it gets really interesting. When they looked at what researchers considered acceptable or problematic, the numbers were actually pretty similar across fields. The lowest rate they'd consider acceptable, meaning no problem here, was around 60 to 75%, and the highest rate that would still be considered a problem ranged from 55 to 75%. Now, let's compare what researchers think replicates versus what they think is acceptable. In all 11 fields, the average estimated replication rate was actually below what they considered the biggest problematic threshold when using the average estimates. And even using the median estimates, 9 out of 11 fields fell below that threshold. This means that a lot of researchers feel their own fields are not meeting their own standards for reliability. Looking at it on an individual level, where each researcher's estimate was compared to their own personal threshold for what is problematic, the numbers were even more striking. Between 41% and 59% of researchers in each field actually said their own field was in the unacceptably low replication region. That is a huge chunk of people feeling concerned. They also did a cool exploratory analysis comparing these researcher estimates to actual replication rates from the SCORE project, which was happening around the same time. This is like checking if their gut feelings were right, and it turns out it was a mixed bag in some fields like finance and sociology. Researchers overestimated how much would replicate compared to the actual SCORE results. But in other fields like public administration and education, they were more pessimistic than the actual results, meaning they underestimated the replication rate. This suggests that researchers' perceptions don't always line up perfectly with reality, and it differs by field. So, what is the big takeaway here? What does this tell us about science and our trust in it? Well, it seems that concerns about whether research findings can be reliably reproduced are widespread across many areas of science, not just one or two. Researchers themselves are aware of this, and on average feel their fields aren't quite hitting the mark of what they consider scientifically trustworthy. It's important to remember, this study isn't trying to say what the actual replication rate is for every field. It is about what researchers believe and what they think is acceptable. And that is really valuable because how scientists perceive their field's reliability influences how they interpret new findings and how they approach their own work. Now, a few limitations to keep in mind because this was a snapshot in time. They can't say if these concerns are spreading or how they developed. They also can't say what researchers thought before all this talk about a replication crisis became common. Hindsight bias is a real thing, meaning once we know the results, it can seem obvious that they would turn out that way. Looking ahead, it would be fascinating to see how these perceptions change over time as more replication studies are done. Do researchers' beliefs shift when they see more evidence? And how do these perceptions influence actual scientific practice? In conclusion, this research gives us a really important look into the minds of scientists. It shows that they're thinking critically about the reliability of their own fields and that many feel there is room for improvement. It is a reminder that science is a process, and understanding how scientists themselves view its strengths and weaknesses is key to moving forward. So, what do you think? Does it surprise you that so many researchers feel their fields might be unreliable? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this breakdown helpful, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to RUBIN'S Mind Lab for more science explained, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next exploration into the fascinating world of research. Thanks for watching.